Why is the world boring? Millions of people around the world still haven't found that this world is boring because they think that they are happy, even in the midst of the fact that they continually experience some suffering, which goes hand in hand with all forms of worldly happiness. Clearly, they are ready to accept some suffering mixed in with what they call happiness. They are willing to accept the sufferings as the price for what they regard as happiness. This trade-off makes the happiness feel sweeter. People feel like they are successful. They have achieved some amount of happiness. They feel pride in being able to achieve some happiness. They even make a point to show their friends, their family, and their circle of friends of how cool they are. Actually, the best they could do was to partially resolve the suffering problem temporarily. People buy into this deception so far that they endorse their silly lifestyle to everyone around them, including the children and the grandchildren. They want everyone to know that they figure out how to live without monotony and without boredom. The alternating happiness and suffering syndrome characterizes the journey of life for those people. There is the significant disappointment and stress that they inevitably must meet, matched with the occasional moment of happiness that they cherish. Instead of seeing their escapades as similar and as boring as rats running on a wheel, or as something too tedious and boring for words, they see this non-stop chase toward nothing as a thrill of life, so they just continue to pursue their voyage in this darkened world. This misconception will assure that they will continue to play the up and down game submerged in a cloud-covered world. In the meantime, there are groups of people emerging who have begun to see that life is monotonous and started to figure a way out of it. They have become more open to new perspectives and have given their minds, which were once closed, the opportunity to be open. And as soon as their minds were allowed to open, the darkness was overpowered by the greater power of light. Life goes on in a swamp of monotony in every moment, but only a few people can see that truth. Not only do they see it, they mistake the monotony of life for a life chock full of wonderful delights and flavors. From another perspective, the monotony of life can also be seen from observing that both happiness and suffering are continuously changing, and nothing can stay the same. Changing phenomenon cannot be controlled or dictated. This principle is one of the factors under the authority of the three characteristics of existence. They are aniccatta, impermanence, dukkhatta, state of suffering or being oppressed, and anatta, no self. Our false views have clouded over these truths, and the result is that we have been unable to see the monotony of it all. Neither the happiness that each of us is pursuing nor the suffering that is constantly being pushed away is lasting. Both take turns coming and going, forcing everyone to struggle to continually pursue what they want, be it want to get or want to push away. Alas, we never get tired of the struggle and the shadow chasing. A lot of people like to show off how smart they are by telling others nothing is permanent, everything passes away. That is easy to say in the midst of suffering. However, when suffering has been replaced by happiness, very few see the same fact in the midst of enjoying some happiness. Suffering brings us closer and often forces us to see the truth, while happiness deceives us away from the truth. When happiness dissolves, people do everything in their power to produce another magic moment. They never learn to accept that happiness must pass, just as suffering does. Trying to pursue unreal happiness and make it forever their own will force them to strain and struggle until they are exhausted. Obviously, all their efforts are certain to fail. This struggle exacerbates the problem and leads to super boredom. So that's a simple description of why most people can't understand what this life is boring means. They just can't see how inherently boring the happiness and suffering they pursue actually is. To understand that, the mind has to be instilled with the wisdom to see the truth behind the three characteristics of existence, and then through direct experience by knowing and seeing with our heart. Once awareness is there at the heart, the supra-understanding arises, and they will have the eyes that see the Dhamma. They will understand on their own and without anyone having to depend upon others and without believing anyone. They will see that they have misunderstood the situation and that their lives, which up to now have been seen as mostly flavorsome visual and audio events, are actually extremely boring. My teacher often tells me, everything in this world is intrinsically boring. He always says we find that meditators regard worldly things as boring, yet people all over the world are happy with those boring things. And sometimes those people think that when my teacher has some kind of remarkable or exotic sense impression through his eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or mind, he will feel happy like those who haven't practiced for very long. This is a downright misunderstanding. It's because for those who understand the Buddha's Dhamma, they are above happiness and suffering as their minds are in the normal state. They don't get carried away by what goes on in the world. What they see or sense ends right there in their mind at suchness, or that's the way it is. No more satisfaction, dissatisfaction, struggle or searching. By stating this, one shouldn't think that he doesn't know what sense impressions are. It's not like he's a robot that doesn't have an idea what is good or bad. On the contrary, he is fully aware. That's why he doesn't get lost in the sense impressions and doesn't put much value on them to the extent that they create desire, satisfaction or dissatisfaction in them. Why are the things of the world boring? It's because no matter how wonderful or extraordinary they appear, they all fall under the power of the three characteristics of existence. Before finishing up this chapter, I would like to summarize the boredom that I have explained earlier in order to ensure that everyone understands it. So, let's distinguish the two types of boredom. There is boredom in the conventional sense, and then there is a boredom in the Dhamma sense. Which is considered boredom in the conventional sense? Boredom in the conventional world is when you are so bored with something that you have to try really hard to get something else to transcend that boredom in order to get rid of it. This effort will go on and on as long as your mind is still filled with desire and false views. And what is considered boredom in the Dhamma sense? Boredom in the Dhamma sense is seeing things through the eyes of an enlightened being. He or she sees clearly that all things are boring, that all conditions are without substance, and that there is really no self. This is to say, everything is impermanent, everything is in the state of suffering, and none of it has anything to do with the self. All things change according to the conditions. They cannot be controlled, and they cannot be truly owned. With deep understanding, we can see that these two types of boredom are dramatically different. We will come to see clearly that the mind that is bored in the conventional sense is a mind full of desire. However, the mind that is bored in the Dhamma sense is filled with wisdom.